story of the day takes us to the Surface Transportation Board as they hear comments on the proposed merger between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern Railway. Our head of intermodal solutions, Mike Bowden-Distel, joins us. Michael, how are you on this fine Thursday morning?
Doing well. How are you guys? Trying to stay cool.
Yeah. Well, we got some serious rain, nice little storm here, but then it's going to heat up into the high 90s here for the rest of the weekend is what I hear. But let's talk about this Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern merger. What's going on there, Michael?
So it still needs to be approved by the STB, Surface Transportation Board, which regulates the railroads. Canadian Pacific hopes it's going to be approved by early 2023. And I think the expectation among most everyone is that it is going to be approved based on language that the Surface Transportation Board used earlier, when that deal was initially announced. Of course, there was some back and forth as, Canadian National wanted to buy it, and, really shareholders preferred Canadian Pacific as much more likely that deal between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern would be approved. So now there's testimony before the Surface Transportation Board, and I don't think it's so much about trying to get the deal blocked entirely. What it's about more is what mitigation measures are going to be put into place in the event that in the likely event that it is approved. And so that's what a lot of the shipper or mostly the railroads are testifying about is sort of measures they want to be put in place to ensure that there's no degradation to competition. So for a deal to be approved, it has to do two things. It has to demonstrate that it enhances railway competition, and it has to demonstrate that it's in the public interest. The first one, enhances competition. This is maybe the only merger that could demonstrate that, because there's not very little overlap between the railway networks. And the fact that most shippers are on board with the deal, don't have a problem with it. CP says there's quote unquote hundreds of shippers that have support the deal, and there haven't been many that have been against it. I think that sort of demonstrates it enhances competition. Really, those have been against it have been the other competing railroads, which seem to be acting in their own interest. So it does seem to me to enhance competition. And then, whether it's in the public interest, that's a little bit more, a squishier topic. But if it enhances railway competition, it is in the public interest. If you can shippers can get those goods to market, potentially trucks can be taken off the road. If there's more intermodal density, let's say between Chicago and Dallas, which is more possible under the merger. So that's kind of where we are. There were some interesting specific things that shippers, or more the railroads wanted. Railroads want to ensure that the Canadian Pacific Kansas City Southern Railway doesn't exert undue power over traffic that is going to cross at Laredo, because some of that track is basically Kansas City Southern controls. And so the idea would be that Kansas City Southern would not give preferential treatment to, let's say, traffic that originates in Chicago and goes to Mexico. If it starts on, goes through Kansas City Southern, Canadian Pacific lines the entire way, versus, let's say, starting with Union Pacific and then getting interchanged. So they want to make sure that that's fair. So that's been, one of the main topics. And then another topic is Canadian National wants that piece of Kansas City Southern that goes, east-west from Kansas City to Illinois.
And digging into that cross-border situation, is that something where they're just afraid that the trains are going to be prioritized because they control so much of it, or is there something where they have to demonstrate that sharing is indeed caring when it comes to the rails?
Well, the biggest rail crossing that's cross-border by far is Laredo, and really Kansas City Southern. It's their main point of crossing. Union Pacific uses a lot of other, different, locations where it crosses. And so, currently as it stands, Kansas City Southern's network only goes as far north as Kansas City. And so really, if something, even though they have some of the track near that border crossing, they couldn't necessarily, dictate the rates that, gives preferential treatment to its freight that originates there, unless maybe it's grain. But now that the network is going to have a much larger reach, they're going to have a much larger share of the traffic that originates that goes across the border. And so, the other railroads want there to be a measure in place that is easy to enforce and say, okay, well, you're taking advantage by charging exorbitant rates because you have this trackage by, the Laredo, gateway. And so they've been more concerned about just the sort of the cross-border, nature of it, because there's only certain points where you can cross the border.
So it sounds to me, Michael, that it sounds like we're increasing some competition there, right? I mean, you're opening more of a corridor from Chicago southbound, into that area, into Dallas and so forth, and into Mexico, north and south. Potentially some east and west there, Kansas City into Illinois, whatever it happens to be there. But at the same time, concerned that this newfound better competition can cause issues that would be caused by more of a monopoly type of thing. Are we getting to the point where mergers, et cetera, are going to be detrimental? Are we? I mean, is this like the last one, or is there more work that needs to be done to make them more efficient?
I think this is the last one. I really think this is the last one. And I even think that if there was any other combination of the Class 1 railroads, it probably wouldn't be approved by the STB, because I think it would have been difficult to demonstrate that it enhances competition. In this case, there's almost no overlap between the rail lines, and in no cases does the options for railroads that Shipper can use go from 2 to 3 or 3 to 2 or 2 to 1. So none of those things happened in this case. And I even think maybe it wouldn't have been approved if it was ended up been Canadian National acquiring Kansas City Southern, because there is more sort of competing tracks sort of in that north-south corridor. I mean, Kansas City Southern mostly a north-south railway. Canadian National has that north-south branch that used to be at the Illinois Central, basically along the Mississippi River. So I think this is the last one.
And with the ongoing labor negotiations from various labor unions within the railroads, do you think that may be a potential tripping block or issue where, when it comes to merging and stuff, there may be some redundancy in personnel or equipment?
Well, they've said that they don't plan to get rid of people as a result of this merger. I mean, I think in theory, if more traffic goes to the railroad and they invest more in some of these corridors, that they would end up adding people because of this. But that's something that always the unions are concerned about, anything that would potentially cut their ranks. But I think in this case, I don't think this is going to be a situation where you eliminate a lot of redundancies. I mean, at least not on the railroad, train and engine type employees. I mean, there may be, obviously back office, don't need 2 investor relations departments, those type of things, but those would be more on the corporate side.
Yeah. So, all right. So Thomas broke the seal. Let's talk about it here real quick. What's your outlook on the cooling off period here that we got with the railroads? Are you feeling confident about there being avoidance of a strike and getting a deal done, or what's your thoughts on the situation there?
Well, I think the whole system is designed to prevent a strike, which is why you have all these cooling down periods, which is why there's all these things that you can't strike at any time. It needs to be a legal strike. I will say that I think the unions are going to drag this out for a long time, and whether it actually comes down to a work stoppage or not, I'm not sure. But what I am confident of is if there is a work stoppage here in September, Congress is going to order back the workers right away. I mean, so the last time that happened was in 1992, and strike lasted 2 days. Congress ordered them back, signed into law by President Herbert Walker Bush. So it might not last 2 days. So I think it'll be, if there is a strike that impacts 157,000 workers, I think it'll be a matter of hours. I don't think Congress will allow that a few weeks before midterm elections.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And it wouldn't, and not only those 150,000 people, it's everybody else in the country is going to hurt pretty bad from a rail strike. Oh, it's not a good thing at all for anybody.
But digging into we're seeing this consolidation, looking at monopoly. I'm thinking, would the word of the day be oligopoly, where we just have like 5 of the major ones? It seems counterintuitive to me. We need to increase competition, but we're going to be merging the companies. Feels like it's an anti-competitive move. When you said this was the last one, would there ever be a situation where let's just break a few of them up so we actually have them, legitimately compete, or is there just not enough rail space to get along?
Well, it's been a fragmented industry in the past. I mean, it used to be extremely fragmented industry, and the reason why it's consolidated is a result of lots of mergers, and certainly it's oligopoly. It's been oligopoly for some time, so and they act pretty well there in terms of not beating up the other company in terms of having lower prices. I mean, I think the prices, the rates that the railroads have charged have exceeded rates of inflation for, let's say, since 2005 or thereabouts. The reason why you can have this merger between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern enhance competition is because it extends the reach of where the shippers can ship their goods. And so, you could have a grain shipper, let's say in the Midwest, now they have the option of, let's say, shipping the grain all the way out through the port of Vancouver, onto China, where that would be difficult now if you'd have to go through a couple different, railways. So in some cases, you're going to have, just more options, just based on where the track is laid out, and the fact that more shippers have more reach. So in this case, because there's non-overlapping geographies, it does seem to enhance competition.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Michael. You have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll be watching this and the labor negotiations quite intently, see what goes on there. So excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Michael. Check out all this stuff on freightways.com and his Twitter, etc. Right now, let's send it over to Isaiah Buchanan in the first set of headlines this morning.